I attempted to have the best reading week of my life the first week of July. It was entirely on purpose, and I'm happy to say that for the most part, I succeeded. Hello, my book babes, and welcome back to my channel if you are not new here. If you are new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I had a pretty mediocre reading month in June. We all know this, and I am determined to make July my BITCH when it comes to reading. I want my July to be the best of the best. So for my first week of July, I decided to pick books that I thought would have 5-star potential. 2 of these are romantasy. One of them is an epic fantasy standalone, and the other one is a cozy fantasy. So I went with all fantasy. Fantasy is my highest chance rating to give something a 5-star, so I thought that'd be a pretty safe bet. And I just kind of mood read for a week, really, where I just picked books that I was like, I've been wanting to read this for so long. I've heard such great things. Let me just finally read it. So this is sort of a reading vlog, except I've already read all these books, so it's more of a book review video, but also combined with a book rec video because almost all of these books were top tier and I would recommend them. Let's start with the first book I read. This is Between Tides and Thunder by Lena Kazik. This book has been having a moment all over Book Talk if you're on that romantasy side. This is a romantasy standalone. However, there is a companion novel that is out called Between Skies and Thunder, I think. It's a direct replication of this book, except and this book is told from our FMC Maya, whereas in this other book is told from the MMC Xavier. So I have not read that book yet. I don't really feel the need to. I don't know, maybe I will at some point, but I still love this book regardless of not wanting to read the second one. Also, this is the indie edition. This actually got officially picked up for trad, as I had a feeling it would, by Scarlet Press. So I'm very excited and happy for Miss Lena Kazik because this book was a grand old time. Honestly, I could have given this book a 4.75 if I was being nitpicky, but this was like the first good fucking food I had when it comes to reading in like a week or two that I ate this book up in 5 hours. Yeah, one sitting, babe. I devoured this entire book. So by the end, I was just like, let me give it a 5-star. Like sometimes I do feel I'm a little stingy with my 5 stars. And then I come across a book that is it 100% perfect like some of my other Infinity Stars or 5 stars? Maybe not, but was it absolutely delectable and left me with that 5-star feeling? Yeah, so we're gonna give it to her, and that's what this book was. When it comes to the tropes, this has enemies / reluctant allies to lovers to something else that I can't really say without spoiling it. Also, it's a standalone, which a lot of people love in romantasy because a lot of times in romantasy or general fantasy, it's the start of a duology, a trilogy, a 10-book series. So when you get an amazing, just standalone an epic story in one book, that's a bonus. Main male character is the embodiment of the touch her and die trope, which I know can be kind of cringy, but I do really like that in my male main characters, and this one in particular is definitely that way. And our FMC is very strong. I didn't find her to be annoying, and the author actually wrote her to have PTSD representation, which I thought was very interesting and I really liked actually and appreciated. So when it comes to the plot, you have our female main character, Princess Maya, who is the princess to her father, who is the king, and they live in the kingdom of Tundrayan, which is like this frozen landscape. And she has agreed to marry the prince of the king nation of Arbinj, I think, which is on the other side of their landmass. And in the middle of these 2 countries is known as rebel territory because the thing is that there are elemental sort of benders or magic users, and then there's commoners or people who do not have powers, and that's where the rebellion is happening. Because both of the nations that value wielders over commoners do not treat non-wielding people well at all, so there's been a whole rebellion started on behalf of non-wielders. But that being said, these 2 nations have been fighting it out anyways for land territory. So in order to hopefully bring peace to their nation and bound together to fight these rebels, Princess Maya agrees to marry the prince of this distant land. However, on the day of her supposed to be marriage ceremony, instead of getting the prince coming over to her land to marry her, she meets with the Dark Commander, who is the prince's brother and the head of the army there, who, by the way, in their previous wars has killed a lot of her friends. And he says, it's too dangerous for the prince to travel all the way over here. He wouldn't feel welcome, so I'm gonna take you and we're gonna travel there and you'll get married to him over in my country. And she's like, fine. On the way there, they get attacked by rebels and split off from the rest of the soldiers. So her and this dark commander named Xavier has to like trudge through the woods to get to his country. And of course, that takes like a month and a half. And all the while, they are growing closer and closer. But it's sort of forbidden because she's supposed to be married to his brother. You see what I mean? But they cannot deny the chemistry between each other. But once she finally does get to Arbingene and the palace, secrets start to be exposed. There's betrayal. There's hidden powers. There's a lot of plot that goes on in this book. It's not just romance, so which I actually really appreciate. While I do love the romance aspect of a romantasy, I also love a really interesting plot and a cool magic system, and that's what this book has. My jaw was on the floor about halfway through when some stuff gets revealed. It's just so good. I love both of our main characters. I love their romance. I love the side characters. I love the magic system. I loved it all. When it comes to my technical qualms with this book, it's mostly with the repetitive nature of the language. Their gods are the tides in this book, and so I cannot tell you how many times I had to read, instead of goddamn, tides damned, or tides something instead of a curse word. It got a little, like, okay, I'm reading a romantasy book and this is what it's doing. And like, I low-key feel like there were a few plot holes, but we're gonna disregard that. I had a great time. I would highly recommend it. 5 stars if you're into romantasy and are looking for your next standalone, particularly. This is a fantastic choice. And then I read The Sword of Kaigen. This is a library copy. I work at the library now. I think I've told you guys. So I actually have a special edition from Wraithmarked of this book that I ordered a long time ago, and it just felt too heavy and too pretty to read. So I decided to check out a library edition so that way I could do whatever I wanted with it, with respect to it, of course. But you know what I mean. Just kind of flop it around, read it, and then if I liked it, then I already have my special edition on display. So let me grab my special edition because I feel like this is not a cute look. Oh, isn't she just stunning? This is way better of a display than my library book. The Sword of Kaigen. Wow, this book was unflinchingly brutal and dark. And I felt it was extremely raw in its character portrayal. And I just feel like it will stay with me for a long time. It's just one of those books. Now, this was not a 5-star. This was a 4.5, but I felt deeply connected to this book. M.L. Wong's writing and prose is stellar, as always. And the way she was able to have me connect with the characters and their growth, particularly in this book, is just next level. Sword of Kaigen is an epic fantasy standalone set in a fantasy world that heavily mimics modern day Japan. And they're in this particular region of the country known as the Sword of Kaigen, and we follow this one main family that involves the patriarch Takura, who is a basically master samurai and has mastered this fantasy element known as the Whispering Blade, where they're able to manipulate water to create a blade of ice so strong it cuts through metal. And his wife, Misaki, which was a forced political marriage, and their 4 children, I believe. 4 or 5. I think it's 4 children. And for a while, we also followed the oldest child's point of view of this family, Marumu. And this book follows their family and the region they're living in as it suffers a devastating foreign invasion, forcing that eldest child and his secretly deadly mother, Misaki, to fight for their survival, shatter their nationalistic illusions, and towards the end, pick up the pieces of their broken family. This is a war family saga all wrapped into one book, and it's absolutely epic. It's a feat, to be sure. The wife and mother in this book, Misaki in particular, is one of the most complex and layered characters I genuinely think I've ever read, as she is consistently being pulled between her true, more violent soldier nature and her previous background, but also her deep desire to make her family proud and adhere to cultural customs of the time. And she's not this perfect feminist embodiment of a female soldier. She succumbs to the same sexist conditioning that the country has instilled in her, and she doesn't necessarily seemingly want to break the mold of the obedient wife completely. But she's able to use her intrinsic female rage to disrupt the narrative and uplift her family, particularly her husband, to do better, be better, and live on in memory of those that they've lost. Not only is she a complete badass, but I feel like she challenged the way that I perceive female main characters to be and what they should be, what they should do. And I found that so refreshing. I also found the themes of political corruption, the generational trauma and effect of propaganda on a nation, and that devastating aftermath of war to be very effective. There is some gory scenes in this. There are some very dark and impactful scenes in this. So I would say do check your triggers. It is the brutality and the aftermath and the reality of war, and it does not hold back. I felt this family's immense pain and suffering, but also reveled in the light and hope they leave us with at the very end of the book. Now, I really like this book. I don't feel like I love it, and that's why it's not a 5-star, it's a 4.5. I did find the pacing to be a bit too slow for me, particularly in the beginning. And there were a few chapters exploring Misaki's background, which I understand were vital to understanding some of the other characters in the book and her inner battle, but they weren't particularly entertaining to me, and I found myself mostly checked out for these past timeline chapters. And I had to read the map and reference the glossary in this book constantly, as Emma Wong kind of just casually throws in magic systems, names of gods, names of people, names of nations, and expects you to figure out. Like, there is no hand-holding, and that's fine, it's an epic fantasy, but there were times where I was like, girl, let me breathe, please. Also, it's so interesting because towards the end of this book, there are some plot lines that get brought up that it feels like there could be a second book after this, but there's not, and as far as I know, there's never planned to be. So I'm just really curious as to perhaps why Emma Wong set up these plot lines in the first place, and why she might prefer to never close them. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing necessarily. I just am kind of curious about it, and it left me just wondering, like, what was the point of some of these plot points being brought up if we were never gonna close the loop. But overall, I can totally see the hype of this book. I get it, fully get it. It's sort of a slow burn. The more you read, the more you get invested, the more you connect with our characters, the more you yearn for their growth and revel in it when they finally adhere to the standards that you want them to. Stunning. It's stellar. If you're looking for your next epic fantasy standalone, if you love character work, family dynamics, people being torn between culture and righteousness, I think you'll really love The Sword of Kaigen. And then I picked up The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This is my Let's Go Literate Fable book club pick because the genre for our month of July was cozy fantasy. We had 4 options and everyone voted on The House in the Cerulean Sea. That's what we picked up. Prior to reading the reviews and getting exposed to further context, all I've heard about this book was that people liked it. And I also got it recommended to me by my coworker at the library. So for me, that's all I really need to know. I don't like to obviously read reviews or delve into a book and know too much about it before I pick it up. So I did not know the controversies around this book until after. So I want to talk about my rating and my thoughts pre-knowledge of controversy, and then we'll get into kind of my feelings after. So pre-controversy, I gave this a 4.25. I really liked it for the most part. I found it to be really sweet and heartwarming. This book follows a disgruntled caseworker who works in a society where there are magical beings, but they're kind of discriminated against and forced to be excluded from society. And he works for a certain sect of the government that oversees orphanages for magical children. And he gets put on assignment to a faraway island for an orphanage for seemingly extremely dangerous children and their caretaker. Our main character, the caseworker Linus, is known to be kind of a loner. He's kind of stuffy. He likes doing things by the book and he likes the rules. But when he gets to this house in the Cerulean Sea and meets these extremely unique cast of characters and these kids and their caretakers, his world gets flipped on his head, and he kind of has to choose between what he knows is right for these children versus what the rules and the government and society are telling him he should do. I did really enjoy the prose, and all of the kiddos sucked me in really quick. I was literally laughing out loud at some of the things they would say. If you end up reading this book, I would highly recommend looking up character art for these kids because they're not just humans. There's this kind of green blob monster guy as one of the kiddos. There's a gnome. There's a fairy. It's all very fun to imagine. There's also a queer love story at the element of this book between the caseworker and the caretaker of these children named Arthur, which I found, again, to be sweet. So while I did agree with the literary themes of this book, which are basically just let people who are different than you be, you can tie it probably to so many modern day marginalized groups and their treatment, which we're going to be discussing. And basically, just letting people live. And just because someone's different than you doesn't mean that you have to fear them or hate them. I agree with that. I will say this comes off very YA in the sense that it is very heavy-handed with that literary theme, and it's very obvious. There's no subtlety, There are quite a few situations and monologues where they literally just say the point. It doesn't really let the reader come to its own conclusions whatsoever. Sometimes I don't mind, but in this particular case, because it was so heavy-handed, and there's some plot, but it's mostly character work and relationships, I found the literary themes to be, again, agreeable, but just a bit too shoved in my face. Also, I found it kind of interesting that the character I connected with the least was our main character, Linus. I really liked the children. Those were the highlights. But him and Arthur's relationship, while it was sweet, at times it was confusing for me. I don't know. I just really didn't connect with Linus as a character, even by the end of the book where he has kind of this character arc. I just found him to be a bit whiny sometimes and kind of annoying. But that's just me. That's just me. Now, I finished this. I felt pretty good about it once I finished it. It was pretty solid for cozy fantasy. And then I looked at the reviews and I saw people dogging on it because apparently the author, TJ Klune, when he was talking about the inspiration for this novel, he mentioned something called the 60s scoop, which is a time in the 60s where Native children were kidnapped from their families and forced into these boarding schools, especially in Canada, though also happened in the United States, where they were separated from their family and taught not to be Native, and they were also highly abused. And he basically inferred that he decided to swap out this modern historical context with these magical children. And so people brought up this issue saying that it feels like Clune capitalized on an absolutely tragic and barbaric time in real modern history and made it into a cozy, whimsical fantasy that really lowered the stakes. And overall, it kind of feels like, why would you get inspired by that to make something so soft and more fantastical? I think people just took offense to that, which is totally fair. And unfortunately, as far as I know, Clune has never really responded to this backlash from his comment or apologized. I think that would have really helped me personally if he maybe came out and was like, this is not what I meant, I sort of misspoke, or at least I understand where you're coming from, I get it. As far as I know, he never has. Let me know down below if he has. And that's kind of where I have my problem with it. I agree with the initial issue. And what he said is pretty weird, but my hope was that he would maybe just take accountability and explain further, because I can see being inspired by historical events, and it is kind of weird to pivot to a cozy, heartwarming genre in the face of barbaric, murderous, bloody history. But yeah, it just seems like the way he went about it was really insensitive, and he doesn't really care to amend that insensitivity. So that being said, I know many people don't like this book, don't like this author because of that. It's hard. Find this out, I enjoyed it. I would have recommended it to people. Now I have very mixed feelings. I don't know if I'd recommend it. I'm debating keeping it on my shelf. I just don't know at this point. I don't know. I'm very curious if you've read this, if you're up to date on the discourse, what you guys think or feel, if this book should be completely denounced as well as its author, or if you feel like there is a gray area or room to separate the art from the artist. I'm not really sure. Yeah, unfortunate situation, because I didn't mind it. I liked it, but it just had to be that way. It kind of sucks when you really like a book, a person, an artist, and they come out and do something kind of weird, and you're like, why'd you have to do that, man? Why? And the last book I picked up for this particular reading blog is In the Veins of the Drowning by Kaylee Cassidy. This is a siren/mermaid romantasy, and unfortunately, it's the book I probably liked the least out of all of these. Now, that being said, it wasn't terrible, it wasn't bad, and actually for the first 2/3 of this book, I was locked in. It was banging, I was gagged, I was loving it. And then the last 1/3 left me more confused than anything. It's actually more of a dark romantasy. It does get a little, just on the darker side with some of the abuse that our main character faces, as well as the hunting and murdering of her fellow siren sisters. But this book follows Imogen, who is a siren in hiding in her initial kingdom. And she was orphaned as a child and then taken in by this tyrannical king who's kind of had her as who's kind of just kept her there, kept her prisoner, abuses her, but also giving her things. It's kind of weird and random. But when she is forced to be in a marriage with one of his captains of his armies, and this guy finds out that she's a siren and seems to want to abuse that capability of her sirenage, she decides to flee and get out of this marriage and runs away with a king of a neighboring country who was there just visiting for a party the king was having. And she forges a dangerous blood bond with this king in order to keep him safe while they go across the sea, because if you form a blood bond with a siren, you're safe from other sirens' lures. Because the story of sirens, they can lure you down and kill you or whatever. So if you have a blood bond with a siren, no other sirens can really harm you. But this blood bond on her initial island country doesn't mean marriage, but in his country it does. So she not only basically does a forced marriage with this guy, and also this blood bond does not let them be more than 10 feet from each other without feeling sick and nauseous. It's very fated mates coded, where like if one of them is talking to someone else, they'll get jealous even though they don't want to. They're supposed to hate each other. You know, it's very like we're supposed to not like each other, but with this bond, we're growing closer and closer. And this book is sort of a journey to see Imogen embrace her true power, find out where she really comes from and her lineage, as she tries to defeat an ancient predatory deity that has been kind of harassing the nations and attacking other sirens. For the good, I mean, the idea of a siren fantasy appeals to me a lot, and I love the way our author wrote our main character and her powers. I really did enjoy our main character. I didn't find her to be too whiny or annoying for the most part. And for a large chunk of the book, I was endeared to our main couple's dynamics, and I really did feel the simmering tension. And I personally like fated mates, forced marriage, forced proximity, so that worked for me. What this book suffered for me was a lack of digestible and easily comprehensible magic, system, and world building. This novel seriously needed a map, which it does not have, and also like a glossary of gods and their lineages and their powers, or even just like a glossary of the magic system. Especially towards the ending, you get thrown so many different names of different gods and deities and how they're related and their history. And I ended up honestly just getting a little confused because I had nothing to reference, no glossary, no even a map to like sort of ground myself. And it just felt like a lot was being thrown my way with little to no building up to that point to have me easily comprehend it. And slowly our main character gets revealed to have a lot of relations to these certain type of gods and just like all these different types of magic. And I just was getting confused, y'all. I really was. And I was starting to lose track of the point and the plot a little bit. Also with our couple, their dynamic of liking each other and like having it be sort of forbidden love and then going back to hating each other. That's fine for like the first half of the book, but then by the end, like 300 pages, y'all gotta get it together. Y'all gotta grow up, communicate, and get over it because their dynamic got a little insufferable for me towards the end. It's hard because I feel like I'm selling on 3.75 because I really did enjoy a decent chunk of this. I like the concept. It's just so unfortunate that last like 20 to 30% really lost me, and it lost me to the point where I'm not even really that invested enough to go on the second book, which is a travesty because the second book literally just came out this past week. So I really wanted to love it, and there were certain elements I liked, but overall, man, that lack of world building and lack of just clarity and plot and where we were going wasn't my favorite part. So yeah, you might really like this if you're into more confusing character relationships and magic systems, and you're into sirens. I will say this definitely like fed my taste for siren, mermaid, or fantasy. I have a few more on my bookshelf that I am very excited to get to. So this is probably the lowest out of all of them. My camera's about to die, but yeah, these are all the books I read in my best reading week ever challenge or attempt for the first week of July. For the most part, I feel like I was very successful. I want to know down below if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them, especially if you didn't like them, because since I liked most of these, I'm curious to see other people's opinions. That's gonna be it for this video. It's a little reading update, little reading review. I think I'm gonna do a summer books challenge next. I'm gonna pick a bunch of books from a bunch of different genres, put them on a roulette wheel, and then spin to see what I read for a week. I think that'll be really fun. But other than that, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're having a wonderful day or night, wherever you are. I hope you're about to read something so delicious and scrumptious. I want that for you. And I'll see y'all in my next video. Bye.